Hi everyone, and welcome to this webinar on organising and trade union education, part of the TUC's Festival of Ideas Organise 2020. Now I can see the number of attendees clicking up here, so I think you all might be entering, so sorry if the little start there was cut off for any of you. I'm Sarah, I'm from the TUC, I'm one of our education officers here in Scotland, and I'm based in Glasgow. And thank you so much to everyone for joining us today. I'm going to start with just a little bit of housekeeping. So you can introduce yourselves and up to other viewers in the chat box, but if you wish to ask a question to any of the panelists, we ask that you use the Q&A special function, because we might miss it if you put it into the chat box. Once we've heard from all our panelists, who I'm going to introduce in just a wee second, we will we'll get through as many of your questions as we can. Now, my colleague is going to post the TUC Code of Conduct into the chat box. I ask you to take a wee second to read that if you've not already done it on one of our previous sessions. So I'll just give you a wee bit of background to this session. So TUC Education and Organising now sits together in the Stronger Unions team, and this is basically just in recognition of the interconnected nature of these two functions. Now in the team we're currently working on updating the TUC resources and support for organising, so I thought this would be a really good opportunity for us to learn and hear from speakers who have been threading together education, organising and campaigning in some really innovative ways and getting brilliant results. So let's dive in and I'll introduce the speakers. So first up, we've got Rob Henthorne, Professional Learning Coordinator with the EIS, who have been doing some really smart work recently in connecting the learning and organising agendas, and of course that's on the back of their Winning Value Education Value Teachers campaign. Then we're going to hear from Keith Johnson, who's the National Education Officer with the Public and Commercial Services Union, and he's going to talk about the work that they've been doing during lockdown to identify and support members who want to get more involved in the union, and they've been hitting some really impressive numbers, so I'm really interested to hear more about what's been going on behind the scenes to make that happen. And then we're going to go to Tam Wilson from the STUC's Young Worker project, I'm Better Than Zero. Now they mainly work with workers in non-unionised workplaces, and I know that the Young Workers project have been creating and delivering some really innovative education programmes, and hopefully that'll be a bit something a bit different for us to think about. And then finally, we're going to be joined by Jennifer McCary, Education Officer with Unison Scotland. And Jen is going to share some of the educational work that was sort of behind the scenes and part of the landmark Glasgow Equal Pay campaign. Now, some of you might know a bit about that, but I think what Jen's going to share with us, you might not know, and I think it's a real treat, so I'm really excited about that. So that's all I really wanted to say. I really want to give as much time to the speakers as possible, because I think they're all going to be really fantastic contributions, and I think we're all going to learn a lot and have a lot to think about from them. So I'll not take up any more time. I'm going to ask Rob from EIS to take over. I'm just going to put him a spotlight and mute myself. Thanks, Rob. Take it away.
1 second. I'll make sure that my screen is being shared and you can all see a couple of slides so that you're not all staring at my patchy lockdown beard throughout this. Yes, thanks very much, Sarah. And as Sarah says, my name's Rob Henthorne. I'm from the Educational Institute of Scotland, which is the largest teaching union up here. And as well as being a professional association which has delivered training and professional development for teachers for many years, we're also a trade union, and so we continue to align our professional learning offer with organising approaches. And so I guess there's two categories of insight that I want to give you in this brief presentation. One is about how we integrate organising priorities into union learning, and second about how we develop a union learning strategy which really supports organising more broadly as a union across all of our work. And so one of the simplest ways in which we go about doing those things is that we seek to use union learning activity to strengthen the organising agenda on specific priorities. So if we have an organising priority, we want to make sure that there's good learning activity that sits alongside it. And a really obvious example of doing that is that we make sure one of our organising priorities over many years has been empowering teachers in their workplace. So we have learning opportunities that go alongside that as well. The picture you're looking at there is from our professional learning conference this year, which provided a space for members to talk about the government and sector approach to the topic of teacher empowerment, and also to develop their own union approach, their own vision, their own campaigns around what empowerment meant. Our perspective on teacher empowerment is that it means worker democracy. So we're developing union learning activities around identifying opportunities for worker democracy and building on them so that our members can take control in their workplace. And the reason for that really is that when members have a stronger understanding of their own working conditions and how they can change them through a professional lens, they can act more powerfully together as a union collective. We've seen that really successfully in the context of the pandemic and coronavirus. Our organisers have been running webinars on things like health and safety, arming members with really practical knowledge about what they can do back in their workplace, whether that's in hub schools or as we move towards the arrangements for after the summer, putting those union activists in control of their professional environment. Another way in which we go about doing this is that we see union learning activities as a space for those organising conversations, those politicising conversations that union members need to be able to have to organise effectively around particular topics. So the picture you're looking at here is from one of our courses on teacher leadership. Obviously, managers and politicians have a very strong idea of what teacher leadership can mean, and we as a union have a slightly different perspective. And what we want is for our members to get a sense of what union-type leadership feels like, what collective leadership feels like, and to have that space to think about what are their needs, what are their challenges in the workplace, and how can they address them collectively, not in the way that their managers think, but in the way that they think. So we've got a space for them in these learning activities to, not be around their managers, not be around their boss, and instead think about how they as workers can change things. Again, there's a really strong corona context to this as well. The way that schools have had to adapt very rapidly to distance learning and teaching through the pandemic. We want to make sure that it's not bureaucrats or managers sitting in offices the other side of Scotland that are making those decisions, but teachers in their classrooms and in their staff rooms who are making decisions about how their schools are run and how those challenges are met. And it also gives us brilliant insights into the actual challenges and conditions of workers on the ground. So those learning spaces are also an opportunity for us to have organising conversations and to generate much more complex and comprehensive organising approaches to challenges that exist across lots of schools. We also make sure that our learning reps, so that's the activists that are normally focused on the professional development of teachers as teachers, we make sure that they play a strong role in the organising agenda as well. And one of the ways that we do that is in the training of EIS Learning Reps. We make sure that they get insight into the main concepts and activities around organising that might otherwise only be for branch reps or area organisers, the people who are doing these like Jane McAlevey courses and things like that. We want our learning reps to have insight into that as well, and to work closely with their branches and local associations to generate organising approaches to whatever topics they're dealing with. And we know that that's important because union learning or professional learning in teaching is one of the main ways in which less engaged members find their way into union activity. They might come to their learning rep with a particular worry about their professional development. And we don't want to just offer support to them as a service. We want that to be a pathway into much more comprehensive organising activity for them. And likewise, as Sarah mentioned, with our value education, value teachers campaign, the Scottish Government committed to raising the opportunities for professional learning within the profession. We saw that as a huge win from an organising based campaign, and we want to make sure that the successes of that are also delivered through further organising. We want issues around professional development, issues around union learning to be just as much a core issue in branch conversations and local association negotiations as health and safety, as equalities, as the basic campaign issues that local union branches are working on, because we know that professional development and learning opportunities are an essential part of people's working conditions, and they're something that we can organise around to build that trust and build that expertise. But one of the most important insights I want to give you into the way that we use union learning to support the organising agenda is around strengthening union identity, which I know is something that our colleagues later on are going to talk a little bit more about, but I just want to give you an insight into the way that we do it. because we believe fundamentally that professional identity and union identity can be two parts of the same thing. We all know that in whatever sector you're in, some managers and people higher up see union activity and union membership as in contrast to being an effective worker. But we believe that being good at your job and being a good union member are two parts of the same thing. And we want to develop that as a really strong part of professional identity within the teaching profession. But I think there's lessons for that outside the teaching profession as well. The union can be a place where professional expertise about your sector and your job are harnessed and developed, because it's people in those workplaces that really know how those jobs should be done and really know how work should be done, and the union can be a champion of that. One of the ways that we do that in the EIS is through our action research grants, where we support members to undertake research projects and to undertake innovative teaching practices, and then reflect on those and share them with colleagues, and do that with the support of the union and with other union members. Now, obviously, practitioner inquiry is it's a very teachery shaped thing. It's very common in the education sector, but there's also some examples of it in other sectors. So those of you who are familiar with workers' inquiry, whether that's Benion's Working for Ford in 1973, or more recently, Callum Cant's 2019 book, Riding for Deliveroo, that idea that a worker in their sector, in their workplace, is the expert on how those jobs are done and how they can be done better, and that a union can be a way of changing those workplaces so the work is better for everyone. That's a really powerful idea, and one that we think union learning is really central to. We want to make it clear for our members and for society more broadly that being a good union member and being an effective employee, member of staff, worker are two parts of the same thing, and that comes through identity and pride and a sense of collective purpose in the workplace. Thanks very much.
Thanks. Oh, I'm just waiting on him coming back. Thanks so much, Rob. That was really fantastic. And those pictures from George Square are very happy memories. I remember that day very well, and it was a real sort of visible representation of all the organising work that had gone to lead up to that point. So thank you for sharing that, Rob. And as just a wee reminder, if anybody does have any questions for any of the specific panellists, pop them in the Q&A and we will get to them at the end. So now I would like to, let me just find him, welcome Keith, to take the spotlight. Let me just give you the spotlight. There we go, Keith. If you would like to unmute yourself and get started, and I will pop myself on mute now. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, you can hear me, sorry. Yeah. Right, let me just share the screen. I wasn't sure whether I had shared the screen, but can you see that now? Yeah. Cool. Right, so what I'm going to talk about is, I can see there's quite a lot of educationalists, quite a lot of trade union tutors and educators on the call today. What I'm going to be talking about is very much informal education. It's very basic stuff, but we have discovered in PCS that what is needed to get more people involved is some pretty basic stuff, and not maybe a traditional rep education. So what is a PCS union advocate? So a lot of this stuff, I'm sure plenty of other unions are also doing. We're not going to be the only union with these problems of getting more people involved, getting more people active. And we've certainly found in trying to do this, the program which we call Advocates, which I'll come on to explain in a minute, has not been without its problems. We initially launched it about 3 years ago, and we've kind of had to go back to the drawing board, and that's coincided with lockdown, and it is now seemed to be getting results, as I'll come on to some of the stats in a minute. So what we call a PCS union advocate is someone who raises union visibility, helps build a union culture in the workplace, and supplements the work of elected reps and the branch. So they're not actually reps themselves, but many do enjoy it and go on to become reps. And I've got some stats on how many people then go on to activity as a union rep. So it's informal, it's not generally negotiating with management, not involved in representing individuals. So why do we need advocates? So I'm sure, like I say, every union is going to be facing these problems. We know that the higher participation the union has, the more leverage we've got, the more powerful workers. So it's a very basic slogan we've got: building, growing, winning, building participation as the first stage, building participation and activity before trying to recruit. Where ourselves and lots of unions have gone wrong in the past is putting the cart before the horse, trying to recruit lots of members without doing the building your rep base and your activist base first, trying to make sure that there's maximum participation in the union comes before trying to recruit. All of that obviously will then lead to winning better deals for workers. So why do we need union advocates? So that's a snapshot of our stats. We've got 180,000 members at the moment, about 5,000 reps. So a ratio of about 34 members to every rep, probably about average in the movement. Everyone would much prefer a better ratio, obviously. There'll be some particularly large unions that probably think that's a great ratio. We could do with those stats, but I think you need somewhere around 1 in 20 to have a really good organising base in workplace. So the average is 3 union positions. Again, lots of unions will have that problem where there's not enough reps, so they're doing multiple roles. There'll be the branch secretary, there'll be the health and safety rep, be a ULR, etc., trying to do it all. Another big problem, average age 48 years old. Again, across the movement, we've got an ageing activist base. One of the big things we want to tackle as well is diversity, tackling underrepresentation. A majority female union, PCS, Civil Service Union, but so 60% female, 40% male, but it's the other way around with activists. In fact, it's more than 60% male activists, and the same with other categories, BME, disabled members, etc. So when we started introducing the idea of advocates, it says 2015, but we really started digging into this about 2016, 17. It was very slow getting people involved because they didn't quite understand what we meant by trying to get people as not reps, as advocates. Now we're up to 4,000, and that has massively increased during lockdown. And over the last year or two, we've had 600 people then go on to rep positions. So it is a good starting point to become a union rep. How do we identify them? Well, we ask people to get involved. So surveys, we've done a lot of large scale surveys, and one of the basic questions there at the end is, do you want to get more involved in the union? We get their number, then we will phone them back, talk to them about getting involved. Lots of short courses that we do are open to all members. That's a good way of getting people through our trade union education program and definitely increasing the diversity of our activist base by the topics that we are choosing. Very popular stuff like menopause, anti-racism, neurodiversity, mental health awareness. As I'm sure lots of other unions are finding, these subjects are great ways of getting people involved. Learning events in the workplace as well. And we've got 2 specific short training courses on identifying workplace leaders. Not everyone is a good advocate or for the union or a good potential rep. It's about spotting who those people may be. So we've got a training session on that, and we've got one on just talking to people, talking about the union, trying to build people's confidence as a rep, talking to people who may become your advocates. Also, we do a lot of direct mailing now to members. Without wishing to undermine our structures, we did find that some branches just weren't getting the information out to members, potential members. So we direct mail as well to make all of those things I've talked about, make them aware of, and also using a lot of social media, our website, etc. So I won't go through our whole training thing that we do with advocates. It's a very short thing, but I'll just whiz through it. It focuses very much on talking to people. This is problematic, obviously, in lockdown, so it's finding ways, digital ways of talking to people, finding ways to access the workforce. But the advocate's role is very much talking at a basic level about the union, encouraging people to join, spreading awareness of our campaigns, and signposting people to reps. that's a summary of the little training session we do with advocates. So encouraging people to talk about the union, using social media. Back in the workplace, we talk about the basic stuff like making sure notice boards are up to date, making sure they've got the information on the intranet, doing newsletters, all of that kind of stuff, leaflets. Integrating learning very much into it, as the previous speakers said, making sure learning events in the office are planned out. Social events, I think something the union movement has probably got out of the habit of doing, just simple quizzes in your branch or other social events. Again, you can do this online in lockdown, a social event. So that is very much part of getting that community feeling back in the union movement. That's very important, and that's something advocates can help out on. And then finally, the support that you get as an advocate, not just from within your branch, but from the regional office and the head office within PCS as well, and a bit about our equality structures as well there. So we end that session with asking them to do something. So it's all very well doing a bit of training with them, but unless you're going to actually ask them to do something, you may lose that engagement. So you ask them to try to recruit one person. It's a small ask, but it's an achievable thing that they could try and do. At the moment, health and safety is our big ask, obviously, about making sure we're returning to safe workplaces. Can you do a survey or petition within your workplace? We've got something called 5 tests, which I'm sure a lot of unions have got something similar about making sure the workplace is safe. And then a final ask about doing something digitally. So that's just a summary of the training we've specifically got for our advocates. So there's an intro session, then there's a follow-up one, and then there's something we call Welcome to PCS, which is more an intro to if you're more interested in becoming an actual rep. And then if you do become a rep, obviously there's a workplace reps course and all the other courses we provide for reps. On the other side, we want to educate the branch as well. It's just as important to tell the reps what they need to do to recruit advocates, how to develop them, how to keep them on board and keep them interested and engaged. Because if they haven't got anything to do, we find that they do drift off. And if that works and they do become more interested in becoming a rep, we're introducing a formal mentoring program as well for those people who do become reps. So that's a bit more in detail. So that's it, Sarah.
Thanks, Keith. If you could just stop sharing your screen and we will move on. Thank you so much. That was really interesting. I think there's definitely common themes coming through from the presentation so far. And I could see Rob nodding away quite a lot with what you were saying. I think that sort of integration is exactly what we were looking for, that real sort of strategic overview of organising, learning and education, rather than them being sort of in little silos. So thank you for giving us further detail on that. And now for something again completely different, we're going to go to Tam from the STUC's Young Worker and Better Than Zero project. I think this is going to be really great. And again, so it's different from where most of us are used to working and organising. Tam works with mainly non-unionised workers. So Tam, over to you. I am going to give you the spotlight. If you give me 1 second. And then I'm going to put myself on mute, Tam, and it's over to you. Thank you.
Just sharing my screen there. Is that there yet? So yeah, thanks very much for inviting me to speak today. It's great to be part of such a great panel. So as Sarah said, my name's Tam Wilson. I work for the STUC, partially on the Better Than Zero campaign and partially on the Young Workers project. Although I'm here to talk predominantly about the education that's provided through the Young Workers project, you kind of need to talk about it in tandem with the Better Than Zero campaign, because the actions of Better Than Zero draw in the activists that then take part in the training, and then the training then fuels the actions of the Better Than Zero campaign going forward. So you kind of have to talk about them both together. Just working out, there we go. So to start off with the Better Than Zero campaign, the Better Than Zero campaign started 5 years ago, kind of in response to the lack of young people engaging with trade unions, and also the growing crisis of precarious work and casualised contracts. It started in Scotland kind of off the back of the independence referendum, sort of harnessing the energy of like the increasing politicisation of young people within society, and sort of trying to push that in the direction towards workplace issues and sort of trade union organising. I know this approach worked because I was an activist and campaigner during that referendum, but didn't really know how to engage with trade unions. And it was the Better Than Zero campaign that sort of opened that door to me and sort of started to get me talking about these certain issues and sort of how to campaign in that realm. So the focus is to challenge exploitative employment practices in low paid and casualised work, looking to provide workers with the tools, tactics and confidence to sort of challenge the things that are happening in their workplace. In many situations begin to form the bones of union structures. We acknowledge that there's a lot of people in casualised work who aren't necessarily well versed in trade unions and what their purpose is. So sort of trying to sort of make the language a bit more approachable, but whilst not watering down actually any of the content that we're pushing forward. The initial focus of the campaign was on the hospitality sector. But over the last couple of years, we've expanded that, and we now represent and engage with workers over a whole range of sectors, and engage with a whole range of different trade unions to take some of that stuff forward. In terms of campaigning, Better Than Zero sort of made a name for itself in using sort of creative ways to sort of highlight some of the issues in precarious work. We've done things like flash mobs, people wearing hazmat suits outside of certain workplaces, turning council licensing meetings into pantomimes. All this sort of stuff helped draw attention to the issues and elevate the workers and the things that they were trying to bring forward. We also then help people in traditional union activity as well, whether that's just signposting people the right union that they're supposed to join, or helping them form sort of a branch that they can then take into a trade union and like take that forward within that union. Better Than Zero provides like sort of an open platform for people to get in touch, predominantly through our Facebook page, where people sort of come forward with their concerns. We don't really have a one-size-fits-all approach to this. Some people just come looking for straight-up advice, where there's other people come as a collective group of people ready to challenge, but are not really sure, and they're just sort of looking for some confidence to take things forward. So whilst we use Better Than Zero to sort of help advocate and elevate the voices of these campaigners, and we also use it as a way of drawing people into some of our training courses. The initial training course that we always try and get people on first and foremost is our Take Control training. Now Take Control can be taken by individuals or groups of individuals in similar sectors, or a group of people all from the same workplace. We kind of adapt the training on a case-by-case basis. But the purpose of the Take Control is to get workers thinking about the initial stages of organising within their workplace. It's partially based off of the practices of Jane McAlevey, who's been mentioned earlier in some of the other slides actually. But the training is an afternoon course, normally 3 or 4 hours, and we split it up into 4 different sections: pinpointing issues, charting who has control, identifying natural leaders, and methods in action. So for the first section of pinpointing pressures, we take workers through an exercise, basically getting them to highlight negative workplace issues. And then we get them to categorise them into whether they're widely felt, deeply felt, or recently felt. And here we can sort of begin to build a picture of a long-term strategy in terms of what people are wanting to be campaigning for, but also highlight the issues, which will be a hook to draw people in, to get more people involved with the campaign. It'll also help us sort of recognise what could be potentially easy victories to take forward, so that we can grow more confidence within the group to take that forward. So that's the first section. The second section is chart and control. So here we sort of lay out the workplace for each of these workplaces, and sort of get workers to start thinking about who has control in the workplace, who has control over certain issues, who we need to sort of pin pressure on to try and move people towards our direction. So we have a couple of different little exercises that we run workers through there to sort of help them sort of understand that better and how they can use that going forward. We then have a section on finding leaders, or identifying leaders within the workplace. So we state that this isn't always the people who are the most vocal, or necessarily the people who think of themselves as leaders, and they're also not necessarily the people who are automatically on board with the issues that you're raising. but we sort of help identify leadership qualities and how some of these workers can maybe speak to the people they've identified as leaders and try and win them over and bring them over to the campaign or whatever they're campaigning for going forward. And then in our last section, we then go through tactics and techniques. So here we discuss like from small initial stages, like getting people to sign up to a petition or even pushing for an initial staff meeting, all the way through to what a strike could potentially look like and how you can build toward that. So we kind of go through all these different processes, hoping to provide people with the tools to sort of establish the initial stages of union activity within their workplace. And then to finish it off, we sort of get people to map the support within their workplace. Now, this is a moving part of the training. They take the map away with them, and ideally they begin to map people in their workplace to be more supportive, and they use the tools to sort of build the map in their favour. So after we've done that training, we then move back with Better Than Zero to sort of support the workers whilst they're trying to push forward any of these issues or trying to build this stuff in their workplace. 2 seconds. So yeah, as I said, the Take Control is our initial training. It's kind of, it doesn't drill down into too much depth into these specific issues, but it's just like initially getting people on board. But we also have like a number of other training sessions that we run. One being our summer school that we ran last year. It was on the Falkland Estate in Fife. And basically this is for anybody who's taken part in a Take Control course before, but maybe wants to drill down into some of these more issues in a bit more depth. It took place over 3 days away on an estate. So the school was focused on the different tactics workers could use to agitate and organise in their workplaces, but it was also used as a tool for sort of building a community across precarious work in Scotland, building confidence for the people to sort of take these issues forward and the power of a collective. But it also gave us a space to sort of think through some sort of creative activities that we could do to sort of draw more people into the issues that we're raising. For example, one of the sessions we made a zine, so we were drawing pictures, writing poems, and sort of putting together a pamphlet of like the experiences of precarious workers, which has then been distributed and drawn more people into the campaign as well. So yeah, post that. So obviously, like in coronavirus times, we've been unable to have a summer school this year. So we're kind of having to adapt the way that we're looking to provide training going forward, moving a lot of stuff to online. But it doesn't really change the tactics in which we're using to draw people in. You know, we use the Better Than Zero campaign to highlight these issues, to elevate the voices of workers, and using that to draw more people in to then put them on training courses and stuff going forward. It's also been clear that the tactics that have been used in things like the summer school have been effective, especially during coronavirus time. For example, the BEC2 reps who are leading the fight against Cineworld and the campaign against what's happening in Cineworld are workers that were on the Falkland Summer School last year. Same with a lot of action that's been taking place in a leisure facility in Lanarkshire. Through the GMB is another activist that was on the Falkland Summer School and has taken part in the Take Control as well. So although a lot of the union activity comes through Better Than Zero, sometimes it comes out through the traditional unions, and it's helped these sort of young activists to be able to engage with their workplace and their union and take stuff forward. We've also, in collaboration with the CWU, just started a new project called the Call Centre Collective. So the Call Centre Collective is sort of looking at basically a similar approach to Better Than Zero, but focusing on a call centre sector specifically, especially with the health and safety concerns that are happening with people returning to work just now. So there's a whole range of different sort of ways that we take this forward, but our focus is on building sort of these small collective groups. Before we necessarily push people too much into the bureaucracy of trade unions, we don't shy away from being a pro-trade union group and trying to get people into trade unions, but we don't bog people down with the bureaucracy of that. We try and elevate people's ability to find their own voice before we necessarily scare them off. So yeah, that's just a sort of quick tour about some of the training that we do through Better Than Zero and how that sort of feeds into the Young Workers Project and vice versa. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Tam. I'll just let you finish sharing your screen there. That was really great, and it was really good to hear about that new campaign that you have developed in call centres. And I know that you have been getting a lot of interest in it, but certainly I think that's going to be a real campaign for the future, and it's going to grow and grow. So I'm excited to see where you take that. So let's move on. Last but definitely not least, I'd like to welcome Jennifer McCary from Unison Scotland. And I'm just going to give you the spotlight, Jen. Give me a second. There you go. Okay, Jen, if you would like to unmute yourself, you've done. I'm going to mute myself now, okay? And then you can share your screen. Thank you so much.
Hi, everybody. It's always a bit weird being in your living room doing this kind of work. So welcome from my house to yours. And thanks very much to the TUC for giving us a chance to get a bit of a space. Lockdown is a great time for thinking, and so I thought in my presentation I would do a wee bit of a, and hopefully inspire us to think a wee bit about the kind of educational tools and methods that we use and why, and can maybe revisit some of the ideas that have inspired me. So just to put a bit of context to it, folks, I've been a trade union organiser for 20 years. I've been a trade union activist for over 30 years. Spent the last 5 years working with the fantastic Unison Glasgow City branch, and was lucky enough to be involved in working on the Glasgow Equal Pay campaign. So I've tried to use some of the tools and techniques that that branch has inspired, and that is the work of that branch and the work of those activists, and share them with you in terms of how we kind of built movement around the Glasgow Equal Pay strike. But just as a couple of headlines, and if you've not came across the Glasgow Equal Pay strike, you should try and find out a bit more about it, because it was a fantastic campaign over a period of about 2 years, which involved eventually about 8,500 mainly women workers going on strike, but their campaign resulted in them winning equal pay compensation in the first wave that amounted to £550 million for about 12,000 low-paid workers in their city. So it really is an incredibly inspiring campaign. But more than that, I'll go into more detail about the kind of prizes that it brought to our movement in the city. So I'm just going to share my... Hope this works. Fantastic. So my background is that I was a community worker for many years before I became a trade union organiser. So community organising and trade union organising have got a great deal of kind of historical connections, and certainly the methodologies and the thinking behind it are something that I'd like to explore in my presentation. So I'm starting off with a quote about Paulo Freire, and I'm asking people to really think about, you know, the function of education. Is it an instrument that's used to facilitate, as Freire says here, the integration of the younger generation into the logic of the present system and bring about conformity, or does it become the practice of freedom, the means by which men and women deal critically and creatively with the reality and discover how to participate in the transformation of the world? And I think it's really important to ask these kind of questions of ourselves and our movement, because often when we think about learning and training, it's about people kind of getting up to speed or obtaining knowledge. But actually, I think that as a movement, we're involved in the process of transformation, so that people think differently about their own conditions and how they live, and what kind of world they want to build. And that for us in the trade union movement starts in our workplaces. So I think we first need to recognise that we're taking our members on a journey with trade union education, and so very similar to the journey that we would have took people on when I was a community worker. You know, we need to convince members and non-members that they can use their collective power to transform work and the conditions of work, and we need to help them get the confidence so that they are willing to take on a fight. And that's not easy to do. Then we need to develop members' participation and confidence. We need to develop their confidence and their ability to build power through the collective. we need to help them understand the current conditions they face with their employer. They need to be strategic, they need to plan, they need to build support, agitate, and then to cut a deal. So I think we need to think about those kind of theories in terms of the tools and techniques that we build in our movement. And I absolutely think that the work that we do should be rooted in developing a culture of democratic participation, that we learn from taking action together and we reflect on that action. So I'm advocating for us to do much more about integrating trade union education into the way that we organise, and vice versa. I would argue that they're intrinsically linked, organising and education, and that we can't separate the two. And that trade union education can't just be about imparting knowledge, but it also must be about the tools that we use and the methodology that require members themselves to become organisers and teachers. And that our movement has been built on the principles of learning together and working class self-education, tools that are popular and participatory. And I say that in the context that I think we need to reflect a wee bit on union learning in the last 20 years and recognise the tremendously positive experience it's been for many of our members. However, if the focus is on personal development, in some cases, the commodification of learning as a service that you purchase as an offer, you receive through your membership of a union, I'm making a case for us to continually make sure that our activist education is rooted in trade union education, and we need to hold that very dear to the way that we think about learning and education, and that always should have a focus on how members can build power in a collective. So what do I mean by that? These are all kind of lofty principles. Well, in Glasgow, the key feature of the campaign for equal pay was it was under the ownership and leadership of its members. That was our starting point. And so one of the methods we used was to undertake a power structure analysis with the Equal Pay campaign. And that, you can see the formation of that. That is kind of one of the flip charts that we used to kind of analyse power in our campaign and decide in a strategy of who we needed to target and what we needed to do to bring politicians and the media and the influencers and our legal teams to support our campaign and slowly kind of build support for our principles and aims around that. So this power structure analysis you see in front of you was undertaken by the members, and it was part of the campaign that was revisited again and again at members' meetings, allowing our members to be the one that were analysing complex legal information or political struggles and identifying what we would do next. So the methods we used were participative, and everybody in the room played a part in that. And that was a really important part of the campaign because, of course, the jewel in the crown for the campaign was not just the cash that would land in people's pockets, but the infrastructure and power that we would create around those kind of key female occupational groups of care and cleaning and education and catering. And we really wanted that to be the outcome of the Glasgow Equal Pay campaign, alongside that we actually had a group of workers that had a very strong union organisation and a strong voice in the workplace. So it was really important that these methods were participative. Also, want to emphasise that this is not something that simply needs to be done in groups, say 2 or 3 or 5 or 6. We had mass meetings, but the nature of the structure and the way that we conducted those meetings meant that they were very much in the ownership of the members, and that's practice that comes not only from kind of my own practice, but very much from the culture of the branch. It's about a kind of building a bottom-up strategy. And the key part of that is about building leadership, and that's especially important when we're talking about groups of workers that are underrepresented. So I want to talk about another feature of the work that we're trying to do in Unison, and we have done in Glasgow City and some other branches, and that's about creating a soft step to activism, because one of the real challenges I think in our movement is that we expect people to go from you know, I'm a member to I'm willing to be active, but actually the journey into that is very often about, as Tam said in his presentation, finding community, finding people like you, building relationships, and then feeling confident enough to step forward. So what we've done, particularly in Unison, is to try and create soft steps into activism. We've designed some courses initially that came through Pathways, which was a course for women we designed, but in the Glasgow City branch, we've designed specific courses around the new job evaluation scheme that allows groups of members to come in and find out about an issue that's relevant to them, that they want to understand more. And when we have them in that space, we collectivise that experience and start talking about how they can reach their ambitions through using their trade union branches and the tools that they can use to, for instance, protect wages that they may be concerned about and the outcomes of job evaluation. We're also using those methods around COVID as well, where we're trying to build a kind of soft step from I'm concerned about health and safety and the return to work into being a health and safety rep. And these kind of short courses that are about like giving people a space where they meet with others like them, whether that's in particular occupational groups, particularly those that are gendered, and also BAME staff as well. So it's a way of targeting people and giving them a soft step into activism. It's really important that the materials are democratic, created. We've been working on those materials in collaboration with the activists and the lay leadership, because it's really important that people see themselves in the leadership, in the structure of the trade union branches and workforces that we're trying to organise. I think that's a really crucial part of people being able to see themselves in our movement. And so I think having materials that are democratically created and that come from the bottom up, and having activists who are tutors, is a really important part of that. So I'm going to just finish that there. I would say that in my input, what I'm really trying to emphasise is that designing education, union education materials, isn't just a technical task, it's a political task. So the tools and techniques that we think about, we need to kind of make sure that they're rooted in the theory of empowerment and of bringing forward those who are traditionally underrepresented in our movement.
Thanks so much, Jen, for that. I'm sure everyone will agree that was really interesting to hear, and a really fantastic way to end our panel. We have been getting some really good questions through, so if I can ask everybody to unmute yourselves, and I'm going to hopefully take everybody off spotlight, and perhaps let me just put it onto gallery view. So I'm going to quickly, we've got 10 minutes left, so hopefully we can get through some of these questions. For any questions that we can't get through, I'm going to think about a way that we can capture that and address that after, maybe a blog or something like that, but we'll get back to you on that. So one of the questions is around how do we build the links and bridges between short, snappy sessions of learning, such as PCS GMB they've suggested, to identify and empower reps, and then trade union education programs and like the TUC courses that any member or union can access. So I guess it's about how do we better connect all the pieces of the puzzle, and I think that for me, and it's exactly what I wanted the theme to be from this, was the need to join up all those bits that can sometimes be quite fragmented. So would anybody like to answer that one first? If you'd like to put your hand up, who would like to go for that?
I'll have a stab at that, Sarah. And I think I might connect it to a question that's come up there about what the future of union learning can look like, and remote learning and distance and things like that.
Yeah.
Because I think it's going to be a difficult thing. Connecting all these different sorts of learning opportunities is going to be difficult for those of us who work for trade unions to do. We shouldn't think that we can curate whole programs of learning for all members all the time, because all their needs are going to be very different. But what we can do collaboratively across the kind of union learning networks is make sure that we're aware of each other's opportunities and how these things can complement each other, so that our reps and our members can navigate them themselves. And I think this joins very closely with the question about the future of this sort of learning and distance learning. And just like Jennifer was saying, learning through action rather than through telling or reading or whatever else. So at the EIS, we're planning all of our courses for the next school session to be online first, but not just replicating the in-person courses that we would have before, because we don't want our members sitting in front of screens for 3 or 4 hours like we might have for a long evening session. Instead, we want them to learn something new, to come up with a piece of activity that they can go away and try doing something different, and then report back and share ideas and learn from each other. And that fits really well with a system where our members and our reps have got access to lots of different sorts of training and can identify for themselves what are the best sources to learn from, how can they develop new skills or get insight into challenges that they're experiencing, and go out and find stuff that will help them build that knowledge, and most importantly, share that with colleagues as well, and share that with other union members. So you're building up that collective set of understanding, that collective way of doing things, and opportunities to develop each other as activists.
Yeah, I think that's really important, Rob. And I guess I think that also links that what you were saying there about us being aware. Like, I think we often say, oh, everything's about organising. Organising isn't everything. But what does that actually mean in practice, in terms of how do we make that happen? And I think we've seen the benefits of this in Scotland, just in terms of being so much more connected with each other and knowing what each other are doing and finding those opportunities, and not expecting that we're going to be able to radicalise everything straight away, but just those little bits of connection that we've been able to build. And I think we'd all agree that we need to build and grow on that. Jen, did you want to come in onto this question?
Yeah, I think one of the points I'd like to make is about when we are building, when we're working with groups of workers that have not been represented well in our movement. So, particular groups of workers. And I think reflecting on Tam's presentation and on my own presentation, when we're trying to build power where power hasn't existed in the past, and where people haven't went through that experience. And I think that that becomes the real challenge, doesn't it? And I firmly, absolutely believe there is nowhere that we cannot organise in the movement. I just want to say that's my bottom line. And I think that the Better Than Zero campaign have really amplified that. But I think sometimes it's about the experiences that we share. It's about the thinking we do together and the way we build community, but it's also about the experiences we share, and kind of those audacious, ridiculous, sometimes fun things that we do in our movement. As Tam talked about, some of the Better Than Zero actions. I remember in the Equal Pay campaign, one of the first things we did is we went round in front of the City Chambers with moustaches on, and did a big lobby, Glasgow City Council, all tashed up. And even just like that experience of kind of learning, thinking, then doing, and then having a laugh, and then reflecting on that and thinking about what we do next. It's about linking our thinking and into actions that then build people's confidence and power. And then, so rather than we consume a course, that's a much, so I agree, it's about integrating that more. And I think that kind of short, bite-sized learning experience being introduced into the kind of organising forums we sit in and the meetings that we have, and the way that we do that, it is a perfect way to do that. So I think that it is really important that we put time and educational resources into that party bottom-up work in branches and localities with groups of disconnected workers, so that as a movement we can respond properly and we can make the most you know, of what we have.
Well, that what I thought, and I was going to ask Keith about this as well, is that, you know, perhaps something else we need to think about is what skills do organisers and officers and you know, everybody involved in this need to deliver this type of work, in terms of the functional skills. That I know, gentlemen, previously you've done a presentation about workshopping a workshop, and everyone was like, "Oh, how would you do that?" You know, so is there a role there that we need to look at, like what are the foundational skills that we need to then make it happen? Never mind what skills do people need to organise, but a bit further back. And I know, Keith, that it's sort of ringing true with me, because I'm with yourself and some in your presentation, because obviously all this work doesn't just happen. There has to be some sort of preparation with your staff and your organisers and your key lay people. Do you want to just talk a little bit about that?
A couple of things. That we have done some training for trainers. I don't think there's enough training for trainers training out there. So I think it's something the movement has to kind of build on. There was the old TUC learning coordinators, I think, course, but that hasn't been run for quite a while. So I think that there's definitely a need for that. Also, we've done a little bit with TUC, a little bit of GFTU in terms of staff, but I think we definitely need, I think as one panelist has said, to make sure we include lay people in that training for trainers education, because there's just not enough people out there, and the base of TUC tutors is shrinking year on year. I think it's less than 100 as far as I know in the country now. So that is something the movement has to think about. Who are the next generation of people passing on this great knowledge? The other thing I want to say is about the short courses do work. We've got a lot of one-day courses and a lot of bite-sized courses, and they do bring people into activity. And I think there's something there about funding, which I probably haven't got time to discuss, but TUC is wedded to what the government give us, which is basically 3 days or minimum, or then 5 days or 10 days courses. That's no good for people wanting to dip their toe in the water and wanting to get involved for the first time. They're not quite sure they want to go down that road. So I think we need to do as much as we can to try to fund shorter training. If unions need to think about how they pool their resources for that kind of stuff. One way we do short courses is something called the single activity matrix, which is a separate funding stream. So I don't know whether other unions do a lot of that as well, but I think that's kind of it's a bit of a dry subject, funding and the length of courses, structure of courses. But I think we can do something on that as well.
Yeah, Keith, I mean, previously when I've been involved in a similar discussion, that was certainly one of my sort of more structural things that we need to look at. We're almost out of time, but I do want to take Tam on this, please, just to finish us off, and then I'll round us up. So Tam, what would you like to contribute?
Yeah, I was just going to come back on one of the questions about face-to-face training, about when you think that, I don't really have a prediction about when that could take place again. And I think the vast majority of people organising within trade unions will tell you that they prefer face-to-face organising. But I think we also need to take this as an opportunity to sort of recognise the skills that a lot of us have developed over the last couple of months in doing online stuff. I mean, this maybe isn't as directly applicable to some of the other trade unions, but organising within precarious work, especially with it being so activist and attention-grabbing focused, it's often drawn to the bigger cities where the actions take place. But precarious work is something that's widespread. It's happening in every town and village. So I think from our perspective anyway, that we need to better take advantage of what we've learned and how we've managed to engage with people online over the last couple of months, and sort of use those skills to start building in smaller towns and villages that don't necessarily have as much of people willing to engage with the stuff like Better Than Zero in its traditional way of going forward. I want to be back out face-to-face organising as soon as possible, but it's about balancing that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really important point, Tam, and I know from some of the courses that we've been running in Scotland for affiliates, that has been like a wonderful like outcome, accidental outcome, is that the connections people are making from workplaces across the country that just wouldn't be in a room together, and there's some really beautiful connections being made and workers helping each other to problem solve, and you know, it's really fantastic. So I agree that there's a lot we can learn from this, but obviously we do love face-to-face classroom and participative, real, you know, immersive educational experiences as well. But I think certainly there'll be lessons we will take from this. So that is us almost at the end of our allocated time. Thank you so much. I mean, I think we could actually just sit here and talk all day. There's so much to unpack in all of this, and your presentations were just fantastic. So I thought of this session was designed as a sort of, let's start the conversation. Like, we're not going to come to any conclusions. We're not going to, you know, decide anything. It's just about, let's get people thinking about how do we better integrate all the different aspects that ultimately should work together to build workers' power and help them win more in their workplaces. So I'm going to leave it there in case we're kicked off at 2 o'clock. So thank you so much to everybody. There's lots of people out there that I can't see, so thanks for joining us. Thanks to all our speakers. There's lots more sessions that you can sign up for Organise 2020, so check on the TUC website and get signed up to any more. All right, thanks everybody, bye.